Hi everyone, it's Sam from the Danger Planet, and today we're going to talk to you about Cloak Dagger, the new strategy in Gaining Grounds 4. So this is a brand new strategy. It kind of looks like some previous strategies, but let me tell you, it really isn't. Cloak and Dagger is very cool, very weird, and very new, so let's learn about it. So the beginning is pretty straightforward and very reminiscent to anyone who has played Break the Line in GG4. After deployment zones are chosen, starting with the defending player, each player alternates creating strategy markers centered on the center line, not within 6 inches of any other strategy marker, until there are a total of 4 on the center line. These strategy markers are concealing, only concealing. You can move right through them. Now, a friendly controlled model within 1 inch of a strategy marker may take the interact action targeting that model, or that marker, ignoring line of sight, to gain an intel token. And after doing so, the other player, the player who did not just interact, can place the strategy marker anywhere within, not completely within, but within 4 inches of its current position. So, you interact with the marker, you take a token from it, and then your opponent gets to leap it away. Now, these intel tokens, once you have them, a friendly controlled model within 1 inch in line of sight of an enemy model with an intel token can interact targeting that enemy model to take one of those tokens. And you ignore that model's engagement range when you do the interact action, but not other models. So the way that works is if it's just you and the opponent, you can interact freely with them, even if you don't have Don't Mind Me. If there are 2 enemy models and they're both engaging you, can't do it. Anyways, once you steal an intel token from that model cannot steal it back. Until the end phase, the target cannot take an intel token back from you. Now, the intel tokens, once you've got them, they stay on you indefinitely. But at the end of each turn, you may choose to pick any number of friendly models that don't have insignificant and discard all of the intel tokens from those chosen models. And if you discard more tokens than you've scored VP for the strategy, you score a point. So first point requires you to discard 1 token, second point requires you to discard 2, and so on. A few interesting wrinkles here. First of all, you don't discard tokens one at a time. You discard them model by model. And if you discard a model's tokens, you have to pitch them all. However, you don't have to pitch every model's tokens. So if you have one model with 1 token, one with 2, and another one with 1, and you have to discard 2 tokens, you can either pitch 2 tokens off of the one who has 2, or 1 token each off of the 2 models that each have 1. So you have some options here. Also, they persist. You don't have to discard any of them. So you could load up on tokens theoretically turn 1 if you're cruise fast enough and just save them. That's the first thing. The second thing to think about is just some basic math. It takes 1 interact action to get the first token for the first point, 2 for the second, 2 tokens for the second point, then 3, then 4. That's a total of 10 interact actions over the course of the game, which is a lot. Now, a standard 8 model crew, assuming a significant totem, has, over the course of a 5-turn game, 8 models, 2 actions per model, so 16 actions, times 5 turns is 80 AP. Assuming all 8 of your models are significant and they all live for the whole game, which is not going to happen. That's still 1/8 of all of your VP just spent interacting on this. And it's not just interacting, because you have to actually get to those strategy markers, and the more you interact with them, the more you have to walk to get to them. So you pair every interact with at least 1 walk, and all of a sudden we're talking about 20 actions. That's a full 1/4 of all the actions you're going to take over the course of a game to max points on this. So what does that mean? Well, it means, first of all, you're almost certainly not going to max points on this. I've played Cloak and Dagger. Getting to 4 points is insanely difficult. 3 is challenging enough. 4 is almost out of reach. This is going to be a relatively low scoring strategy. Now, you can push to get that 4th point, but it's going to be really tough unless you're already winning by a lot. The second thing is, interacting with your opponent to steal strategy markers is way more efficient, because, first of all, you can spend AP productively to get up into your opponent's face doing charges and things, so it's not like you're wasting your AP walking. And second, your spending an AP is worth basically 2. 1 AP that you didn't have to spend interacting with a strategy marker, and taxing your opponent for 1, because they did waste at least 1 AP on that marker. So it's way more efficient to steal from your opponent. So what does that add up to? Well, Cloak and Dagger, despite the name making it seem very kind of tricky and skirmishy, is a pretty aggressive and killy strategy. you really want to get in there. You want to punish your opponent. If they interact, you want to steal those tokens from them. And that also means you don't really want to interact with the strategy markers unless you can pretty quickly get away from there, or unless you really have to. It's a very interesting strategy that creates interesting incentives. This is also a strategy where I think pass tokens are incredibly strong. As we've said, the best play in this strategy is to wait for your opponent to interact to get a strategy token, an intel token, and then steal it from them. And pass tokens, letting you hold your activation for later in the turn, are a great way of doing that. Another thing that's very strong in this strategy is out-of-sequence actions. That would be things like Dark Bargain or Obey, or other abilities that let a friendly model take an action. Because letting a friendly model take an interact action outside of the normal, the normal timing of it, gives you a lot of really interesting play options in this. For one thing, it lets them interact, and then on their activation maybe run away, so your opponent can't take the token from them. Another thing that it could do is you could move a friendly model up into range to take a token, but if they don't have enough AP to interact right away, you then wait till later in the turn after your opponent has activated models near them. Then you make them interact to take a token from the strategy marker, safe in the knowledge that your opponent can't steal it back from them. So this is a strategy that I think really rewards having obeys, having dark bargains, having basically just actions that let your models activate outside of their own activation. It also rewards pass tokens. And I think it rewards models that have this little bit like small mobility, basically being able to move the 5 inches roughly, given the base width, to get to a strategy marker after it's jumped away. So little bit, little pushes, little things like chain gang, going to be very effective here. Take by the hand, things like that. You also are going to want to have some models that are kind of hanging out together, mutually defending each other, especially with the 2-inch engage. If you have a model with a 2-inch engage, that can be the buddy hanging out near the token carrier. Now the token carrier is safe because his buddy with a 2-inch engage is going to stop anybody near him from interacting and stealing that token back from him. So there are some really interesting ways that this strategy pushes you to play, but I think the really defining fact of this strategy that you have to bear in mind is the sheer AP tax it puts on you to score. You need to play a crew that is able to generate a lot of AP, or that is able to have AP multiplying effects. Now what do I mean by that? Well, the classic one is Zora's Ensorcel, right? Spend 1 AP, get 2 AP from the target. But things like for example, the Race is On with Bo Peep, it's effectively a lot of half walk actions. The Nexus Kids, another good example. I think they got nerfed pretty hard, but if they're good in any strategy, it might be this one. Because they have playthings, so they can push your own models up the board pretty easily, and they also have the ability to make friendly models act. I think Nexus 1 in particular is actually very, very strong here, because Will of Cadmus means at the very end of the turn, you can take those interact actions to steal intel tokens from enemy models, and you can even do it with a little bit of a 2-inch push beforehand with the Uncomfortable Twitch trigger, so that you can get your model in exactly the position they need to be in to interact with that enemy model and steal their token. So you want models like that, models that can maybe hold or delay actions till later in the turn, models that can pass around AP, models that can take the interact action on other models' activations. Just things like that. You also want to be very aware while you're playing of how you're placing the strategy markers. That's a very important strategic element to the strategy that is totally agnostic to your crew. It's pure player skill. And it's something that I think we're really going to develop over the course of this GG, an instinct for how you should be moving those. Now, the natural thing that you would want to do is move them towards you. Once your opponent interacts with a marker, you want that marker coming towards you so you can interact with it back and get those tokens. And I do think that eases the AP tax a little bit, because it means that rather than have to go to the marker can kind of come to you. However, you also want to be keeping your eye open for ways that you can place those markers strategically. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, remember, first of all, they're concealing. So when you place them, placing them into position to conceal your own models would be pretty strong if your opponent's playing like a gunline type crew. Secondly, that after your opponent, you place it closer to you and then you interact, your opponent is going to get to place it again. So if you're moving the marker towards you, see if you can position it in a way that once your opponent moves it, they don't really have good places to put it. I'll give you an example. If there's like a big scrum in the center of the board that has both players' models in it, you could move one of the strategy markers towards that scrum after your opponent interacts with it because your models are already there. But if you do that, your opponent is then going to teleport it closer to their models at their side of the scrum. What you might want to do instead is after your opponent interacts and you get a chance to place the strategy marker, place it off to the side a bit where you maybe have a model that's running up and flanking, and that model can take advantage, run in, interact, and now, yes, your opponent gets to place the strategy marker, but they don't really have anybody nearby. Relatedly, this is a strategy that I think really both rewards models that can run off on their own, like run up a flank, what we call scheme runners, and also punishes people if their scheme runners are not durable enough to survive. I often like sending something like Swine Cursed up flanks because Swine Cursed can be fast pretty easily if you need them to be, and they have a pretty agile ability to get up there just with those 3 AP, but also using Frightening Reminder to push other friendlies around, so they're still kind of contributing even as they go up the flank. And if you have a pair of them, or one of them and another model, they can kind of push each other up the board. Like them in a Bokor, the Bokor has Consolidate Power, the Swine Cursed has a Frightening Reminder, so if you're careful with your positioning, they can kind of ping-pong ladder themselves up the board. Swine Cursed are also very durable, so if your opponent is sending somebody up the flank, the Swine Cursed can run in and smash them. Now, another thing that I think you should keep in mind is that remember that you place these markers yourself at the start of the game. So you should look at the board, look at the center line, look at the deployment zones, and think, is there a place where I can put these markers that's beneficial to me? If you're a crew that's really brawly, maybe even bubbly, you want those markers, as many of them as you can, in the center. So maybe when you place one, place it strategically to leave lots of room for other markers near the center. If you're a crew that really goes wide and fast, something like Zip with Iron Skeeters, you might want to be placing those markers way out on the flanks where it's hard for your opponent to get to, but easy for you to get to. There's a lot of strategy in terms of where you place those markers initially and also where you move them to. But I think that with the more you play, and especially as you figure out what masters you really like in this strategy, you'll be able to figure out exactly where you want those markers to be. In terms of schemes, remember this one, as I've said, very AP taxing. You're going to be really spending a lot of AP just scoring the strategy, so you don't want schemes that are also going to be super AP taxy. Schemes like Let Them Bleed, Deathbeds, can be both reasonable. They're models, schemes that score for killing your opponent's models. So, you don't really need to be investing a bunch of non-productive AP in order to make those schemes do their thing. But you could also pick schemes that are maybe rewarding the kind of thing you want to do, even if they do require a bit of AP as well. So, for example, in Snare, you have an idea of where your opponent's models are going to be, because they have to go to where the strategy tokens are, so you can predict where they're going to land within Snare. Now, that is taxing your AP even more, but if you have an ability like False Claim or Launch into Space that can drop 2 markers pretty simply with one action, then you're golden. You have the ability to really set this up without taxing your AP too much on top of the taxing you're already doing. And when you're picking a crew, again, just pick a crew that has a lot of available AP. And when you're building a list, think about maybe a list that has more AP. Like I said, the standard list is 8 models. Think about building a 9 or even 10 model list. Maybe don't take this expensive 10-stone Enforcer. Take a couple of 5-stone minions as long as they're durable. Things like that. These kind of go wide lists have historically not been super strong in Malifaux. And if you don't have durable minions, it's probably not worth it, because the standard problem with, it's the 5-stone minion problem, is they just die. But if you have reasonably durable small models, I think Necropunks are a good example, Scavengers are a good example. I'm talking about Amalgam a lot, but there are a few different other examples. Buckaroos, I think, are worth a shout. Then you can have these models that are able to spread across, cover a lot of the board, spend a lot of AP, and basically out AP your opponent. And I think that's a good way to win. So that's Cloak and Dagger. Very interesting strategy. Really requires you to think about crew building in a different way, and it's really different from what we've seen before. So I like it. I'm a little concerned that the fact that it's very low scoring means that schemes are going to matter maybe much more than normal, which in some cases, depending on the scheme pool, can really favor some crews and make other crews less viable. But I think that's fair. That's part of the game. It's it's not good for the game if every single strategy is exactly as easy as every other strategy to score. So we hope that you've learned a lot from this video. If you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm right on base, if there's a specific master you think is great, please let us know in the comments, or you can join our Discord. The link is in the description. Talk about Malifaux and all the other games that we play here at Danger Planet. If you really like our content, please thank us, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and you could also join our Patreon, which has launched recently. There's a link for that in the description. That would be really great, and we have some really cool rewards for our patrons that I can't wait to tell you about. But right now, we're just offering some really cool stuff. Go to the Patreon, check it out, and if you think our content's good, kick us $1 or $2 and help keep it going. Anyways, until next time, thanks for stopping by the Danger Planet.